The fight against corruption requires the confrontation of a mafia culture in South Africa. Now, this is according to the former public protector and law trust chair in social justice at Stellenbosch University, Professor Thuli Madonsela. She says the country needs to deal with the so-called untouchable people who are at the center of worsening corruption in the country. To discuss this further, I'm joined now by Professor Thuli Madonsela. Very good evening, good afternoon to you. Thank you so much for your time, Professor. Perhaps let me start off with a word of congratulations on your appointment as chair. It must be an exciting role to take up. Talk to us about what the role is about and some of the achievements you hope to make.
Greetings, Mpho and viewers, and thank you for the privilege. Being chairperson of the Cities Alliance means working with governments that are part of this UN initiative to end informal settlements, but whilst pursuing that big goal of ending that subhuman life, we work at improving the quality of life right now, making sure that people who live in slums or informal settlements do not have a slum experience. They have clean environments, water, energy, and sanitation, and there is infrastructure to make sure that children who grow in those spaces have respect for themselves, respect for life, and have a relative access to many opportunities in life.
Yeah. Sounds like a fantastic role to take up. But let's perhaps focus on this matter at hand here. You, as public protector, in your role as public protector, had ordered the State Capture Commission, which recently released its final report. And then comes the point of accountability, where there's a lot of frustration for those who should be held accountable for corruption. In your article, you speak about how if we're going to fight corruption, there should be no holy cows. My question would then be, where lie the loopholes when it comes to exemption from punishment?
Well, the loopholes when it comes to accountability for corrupt deeds are twofold. Some of the loopholes are in the system because, as I've indicated previously, state capture was a network that was like a spider web. So the main guys that may have been dislodged does not mean the system has been dislodged. If we look at the State Security Agency, it's so dysfunctional. We should be knowing, for example, well in advance about the threats to the country that are posed by the people who ended up raping women. But because that institution was captured and refocused on protecting the interest of a few, it was diverted totally from its mandate, because the people who were then recruited to the State Security Agency were not recruited to secure the state and people of South Africa. They were recruited and trained to secure the interests of those who recruited them. The same thing happened with crime agents in crime intelligence in South Africa, and just generally the criminal justice system. And so if we are looking forward at what needs to be done, it is to think about these institutions. So I said the capture was inside, but outside today, what we need to think about is what is the public messaging or public narrative. On my timeline on Twitter, I get people that say, you don't touch people because they're black like you. That's mafia language. That's why my article spoke about that. You don't touch family. When Michael says to his brother, whatever you do, you cannot go against the family. So that means in South Africa, the majority of people in this country are black. Then we would go against nobody. Well, we would go against very few people who do wrong things. But within that, there's also a message that's saying some people are godfathers, like in the mafia. Instead of organizations and public institutions being there for democratic purposes, people see them as vehicle to protect their leaders. And that's a culture of impunity. That's a culture that violates the rule of law. But more importantly, it's an unjust culture that will destroy democracy.
So how then do we begin the processes? The recommendations of the State Capture Commission of Inquiry are one thing, but the actual physical work of dismantling this mafia culture. I mean, you also have made reference in your article about an emerging gangster culture, which speaks to deep-rooted rot, so to speak.
Absolutely. We start by dismantling the tentacles of the monster, that is either state capture or any other organized corruption. And that means that the findings of the Commission of Inquiry should be implemented and people should be held accountable through the criminal justice system and also through the civil justice system, because one of the ways people hold others at ransom, it is privileges, financial privileges. So you need to hit this monster through the criminal justice system, but also through the civil justice system, so that their deep pockets are emptied and they're not able to buy their way into corrupting everything in the public service. So that's the first part. The second part is we have something that's called defend our democracy. Defend our democracy needs to not just speak to the rule of law. It needs to speak to hunger, anger, inequality, and poverty. Because, trust me, Mpo, you would not defend democracy if it meant nothing to you. If defending democracy is about propping the rich and middle class so that they can live comfortable lives without crime, you would not really support that quest. So we need to roll up our sleeves to make sure that this democracy stops the pivoting that it did. It pivoted away from the dream of a society that works for everyone. So we all need to give up something, including possibly being taxed a little bit more, so that those who are left behind get something and they themselves enjoy upward mobility and their hard work is rewarded by access to opportunities and privileges in society.
As you and I speak, Professor, we have the president of the country implicated in illegal dealings, such as the Farmgate matter. Does it make it more difficult to root out corruption, or perhaps even discourage it from happening when you have, a respected leader like President Cyril Ramaphosa implicated in such dealings? Does this now validate your statement when you say talk left and walk right?
Well, absolutely. The whole question of talking left and walking right is people who claim to be Marxist communists, but at the end of the day, they are milking the public purse to finance their luxurious habits. It's not the same thing as the president. I wouldn't say he's implicated. I would say he's accused.
Yes,
he becomes implicated when we can tell that what happened in his farm honestly had his own footprint on it. But you're right, should he be implicated, that would make it very difficult, because those who hold others accountable need to be on slightly higher ground than those they hold accountable. That's just a universal requirement. That's why judges need to be fit and proper persons, public protectors need to be a fit and proper person, auditors general, etc. Those people should have a little bit higher in morality than an ordinary person. Then that applies to a president. But I do want to indicate again that what the president is being accused of is not corruption. Corruption is abuse of entrusted power for personal gain. The corrupt people are the people that have twisted our public service processes. Instead of those services serving our interests as a democratic society, those institutions have been diverted to serve their interests so that they can get tenders, so that they can multiply the amount of money for those tenders. If something was supposed to cost 1 million rand, it costs 10, sometimes even more. They also twist the law enforcement system so that when accountability day comes, they're not held accountable because they've created tentacles of people who are dependent on them for benefits that they don't deserve. So it's either they hold people, it's either they use bribery or they use extortion to make sure that people in government serve their interests instead of serving the interests of democracy.
Yeah, right. Now various arms of the state have a role to play in the fight against corruption. And, I mean, surely we cannot, we as a society cannot leave it entirely to government to do the work on its own. And then, at the same time, there are also important considerations to be made when one thinks perhaps of playing an active role and becoming a whistleblower, especially because of what we've seen happen to whistleblowers who are often sidelined, having to now live in exile in other countries. You know, then it begs the question, is it worth it to become, vested in the solutions and assisting as a member, an ordinary member of society?
You're absolutely right. We need to walk the talk on ending corruption, including how we respond to whistleblowers. One of the examples is what happened to Williams, who's now living in exile after having whistleblown against Baines. The UK government has acted against Baines, and the offence was not even against the UK. But in South Africa, Baines still remains part of our system. And Baines is not alone. There are other companies that were acted against, like KPMG, etc. So what it says, there should be no holy cows. And how we get rid of holy cows is making sure there are no vested interests. You see, when people whistleblow to institutions of government, they should be whistleblowing to people who have no vested interest in keeping the wrongdoers out of the criminal justice system. So that's number one. The second thing is us in civil society who are not involved in government or in the companies that are corrupt. When these people are now looking for jobs, we should give them jobs, because it seems to me that we say we want people to whistleblow, and we do benefit from whistleblowers, because auditing only uncovers 10% of criminality in business processes in government and in the business sector. So we honestly depend on whistleblowers to do all of the things we do. So when they're looking for jobs, let's provide jobs. And if they start a fund to finance them as they are being persecuted, we need to open our hearts and our wallets to support them.
Yeah. Let's leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for weighing in on this discussion. Professor Thuli Madonsela there, of course, speaking about corruption and what needs to happen to hold those implicated or accused accountable.